So we finally got everything patched in with the new SSL mixer, the X-Desk. A lot of people were asking about, how does it sound? How do you like it? Show us how it's connected, all these things. So I've only just got everything set up. I took advantage of, the fact that I had to accommodate the X-Desk in the patch bay. I took the opportunity to rearrange the entire bay, and that was cool, but it was also a hell of a lot of work. I'm in this temporary setup now. It's very small, and I don't really have a lot of room back there, so it kind of sucked. But my bay, as you can see, I'm using these Redco TT on the front and DB25 on the back patch bays. They're fantastic. They're the most affordable 96-point TT bays, and they're high quality. Redco makes a great product, and it gives me, there's a lot of flexibility. Right? I think it's 384 points or something like that. But it's really this Rubik's cube, squared kind of dilemma of having all of these patch points with all of this gear, but it has to be in banks of 8, which that makes it trickier than it might be otherwise. But at least I don't have to solder or anything, so there's that. Anyway, this is the I moved a bunch of gear around. This is the end result. We've got DW Fern station over here. The VT7 on top is the tube compressor that's on the main mix insert for the API. And then the VT2 is the 2-channel mic pre, which is my go-to. I think this is the best mic preamp on earth. I got my first Fern VT1, I don't know, 7 years ago, and then eventually sold that and got the 2-channel version. I find that, I'm prioritizing what I need to be able to reach. And, oops, I thought that music was going to be on repeat. Let's do that. The mic pre, when I'm doing vocals, I really need to have that readily available. And then I find of the mastering equipment, the thing I need to tweak the most is the compressor. Right now, my insert chain for the master bus on the API, I've said this in other videos, as I'm hitting the VT7 compressor, and then this got bumped out of the desk. This is the Chandler Curve Bender EQ, which is it's an EQ that they basically lifted the design out of custom Abbey Road console. With this, I would prefer to have it up by the desk, but it's a little more set and forget. Like, I get the sound, and then I don't find that I'm usually tweaking it all that much once I kind of get the general sound that I need. Whereas the compressor, I'm tweaking all the time. So it's not so terrible having that leave the desk. But so Fern World on the right, obviously the API. Now, what I decided to do with the X-Desk, and I went through a few iterations of this and ideas, but I finally decided that the best use of this was to make this kind of drum world. So this was going to be a drum submixer. And right now, the music that's playing, these are live tracks from a concert that a local artist named Matt Dorsey played. And in this case, there's only 6 tracks of drums, so that works out fine. But in general, the layout is 1 through 8 being just drums, and then I've renumbered here, so 9 through 32 is up here on the API, and then of course. So 9 through 16 on this side, which is normally the recording side of the API, has the 500 series slots. Now what I did was I opened up a new rack to be the inserts for this, for the drums, which I moved my API equalizers over there. Right now, these 550As are still here, but I have another pair of these shipping tomorrow. So those are gonna arrive, go here. These will bump over to there. And these, by the way, these are the BAE version of like this, they call it the 73 EQL. It's supposed to be like their 1073. Honestly, I don't find them to be terribly much like real 1073s, but it's actually a good thing as far as I'm concerned. I always found the 1073s to be very sort of heavy-handed and not terribly flexible. I mean, they can be great, but you know, like they're always good on drums, but you know, like I used to rent original 1073s when I was in New York back in the 90s all the time, and you know, they're nice, but I found myself really renting them for the preamps, and a lot of times I didn't even use the equalizer because I just felt like it was too strong a flavor and not flexible enough. These, on the other hand, are actually quite flexible. You can look these up, you know, just go look up the product in Sweetwater or Vintage King or whoever, and they've added a lot of frequency bands to all three, really, and so it's much more flexible than the original 1073. The sound also is very, very smooth, and it's not, you know, if you want an original 1073, this won't do your fix, but I love these. I find the sound to be really rich and smooth, and just really high quality. It's just a great EQ, much more flexible than the original. So yeah, I love these things. I think they sound fantastic. And so this section of the board will be, you know, 6 of these and then 2 of the Helios. And I love these Helios. I definitely see more of those in my future, but yeah, at the moment I wanted to stick with the Neves. The Helios are just such an oddball. Like they're wonderful, but they're really, you know, they're really strange in their layout and not traditional by any means. I love them on guitars. I don't really consider them problem solvers. They're much more of like enhancers, you know, but they're really great. So basically, when the 550As bounce over and the new Neves are here, they're BAEs, but you know what I mean. So they'll have 16 channels with EQs dedicated, more so here than there. So yeah, again, the thing about the API box is that the stuff in this 500 series rack is really dedicated to these channels. There are jacks on the back to be able to send signals, you know, to the 500 series units, but if you actually use them, they defeat both the mic pre and the line input, so nobody uses them. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people who have the board don't use it at all because they don't want to dedicate devices to these channels. I don't feel that way. I like having EQs in line. You know, you save a ton of patching and, you know, miles of cable and soldering and all kinds of things. You get a very clean signal. And, you know, my feeling is if I want to send something to that EQ, I'll just patch it, you know, I'll send it from the computer into that channel. But I have to admit, it's nice to have flexibility. So, so these over here, which will eventually have those 550As, so it'll be eight API EQs. What I did with these is I have them normaled in the patch bay. So I don't know if you can even see it, but let's just put on a light here. So basically the yellow part, what you have here is the insert sends on top from the SSL, from the X-Desk, and then the EQ in right below it. So those are normaled. And then the EQ return, normaled to the insert return. So it's cute. I mean, you know, I don't have to patch anything. I can just hit the insert button and it will go to the EQ and back. The reason why you see patching going on there is because I decided that I wanted to hit these purple compressors for the kick and snare before I hit the EQs. But, you know, that's the beauty of a patch bay. You've got full flexibility. So let's take a look at this setup for the X-Desk. To answer your question, how do I like it? I love it. So far, it's great. Here, that's all the drums. Just great smack, lots of headroom, cymbals are nice and clear. And again, this is a live recording. And that's just, you know, one kick mic, one snare, and toms and overheads, and that's it. It's pretty good. So the reason I bought this unit was that it so nicely mirrored what was already going on the API. So, you know, it has, you know, so beyond like, you know, faders, pan, you know, mute and solo and so on, it has the same general aux send layout as this. It has one stereo and two mono aux sends. And then the nice part about having a dedicated mixer for the drums is it's basically a built-in subgroup, which this board does not have. You know, and I miss them. I was, as you saw in other videos before, I was creating a drum subgroup on the stereo aux and bringing that back on faders. So what I'm doing exactly the same thing, but on this mixer. So I'm using the stereo aux send on here. I'm sending that to the Fatso stereo processing. And then a very nice thing about this desk that the API does not have is it has stereo effects returns. So basically I'm creating a custom drum bus on the stereo aux send. And I can control the send level here if I want to affect how hard it's hitting the Fatso. And then I have stereo return. So I get my parallel you know, drum bus that way. And I had made a mistake on my first video. I hadn't tried it yet, the mixer. I was just so excited about it. But yeah, this does not provide parallel. This is just the overall send level, but it's fine. I'm still getting parallel by using the effects return. And then I'm using one of the mono sends to send to the PCM92 over here. And this is what I was doing before anyway with the API, which is this is a dual engine unit. So you can run two entirely distinct effects on it. And it's a little bit of a kludge, but you know, basically the left input will go to engine 1 and the right input will go to engine 2, but they will both generate full stereo effects. So I have a drum reverb on 1 and I have a vocal reverb on 2, and then they both come out the same output pair of left-right. So you have to do your balance between the reverbs on the send side, but then I'm bringing the two, you know, the return from that device here to these two channels. And that's nice having a full dedicated channel for that. You know, I'm looking actually now at dedicating a less expensive EQ, just so that I can scoop out bottom end and whatever. You know, tweak the reverb return signal a little bit on that channel. But it's awfully nice having fader returns for those. And it allows me to send a hotter level than I was before with the API. So then Anyway, back to here. So we have our drum channels, we have our inserted EQs, and easy enough to, if you know, to include compressors or anything else in the insert if they're so desired. I have the parallel bus with the Fatso processing, which really sounds amazing. And then, you know, I'm just rolling it in with the return level on the stereo return. And that sounds so good. Like, you really, I find I need less compression on the individual channels with that. It just sounds fantastic. So now I'm coming out of the mix output on this. So I'm not using the monitor section at all. And that has downsides as well. I mean, solo doesn't really function on this, but it's only 8 channels. If I want to solo something, you know, I can just cut everything else. And same thing. So, you know, I can live with that as a downside. But so I'm coming out of the mix output. People wanted to see patching. You can see this online. You can just Google it. But it's all in the back. Can you see it? It's all DB25 connectors except for the monitor outputs. So there you go. So DB25, and the only XLRs are actually the speaker outs, which I'm not even using. So sorry about the clumsy camera work there. But so basically the line inputs, that's one dedicated DB25, and the insert sends, insert returns, those are dedicated DB25s. And then it has a master out DB25 that includes everything that's going out here. So it includes all of the effects sends, it includes the mix output, and something else too, I forgot. And then there's a DB25 for the center channel in, which is again your effects returns. There's an external input, you know, for like a 2-track input, which I'm not using, but I could. So yeah, so basically this section doesn't really, I'm not doing anything with it. The mix output then feeds the summing input on the API, and I mean, it's what it was made to do, and I'm doing it. And it comes in on the master channel before all the processing. It hits before the 527 compressors, and also before the insert on the main bus here on the API. So you know, that's the long and the short of how I'm using the X-Desk. One thing that's really nice I'm liking about this desk is it actually has trim pots on the inputs, and it's just, you can see I'm using them. You know, it's really nice. It's nice to have that. You know, you can maximize, well, you can maximize, but you can also get a very safe D to A conversion and make sure it's really clean, and then bring it up here so that you have a nice healthy signal to go to your analog processing. So you know, it works really nicely. And yes, just subjectively, you know, I just got this thing, so I'll have more to say later, I'm sure. But my opinion of what I'm hearing, the differences between this board and this board, is so far at least, they both, you know, they're both very high headroom. In very subtle ways, I feel like the SSL has more of a distinct sound. And I've been mixing drums exactly the same way on this board for a year now with the same equalizers. So I have a real sense of comparison for what I'm hearing. As a matter of fact, this song, I just mixed that way like a week or two ago. So I really have a sense of the difference of what I'm hearing. And again, it's very subtle, but I find the SSL, it has more of a distinct sound, and that's both, you know, that's good and bad. You know, it's not really bad. Like it's just, you know, SSLs, you know, have a little bit more of a signature. People might not agree with me on that. They might think that the API has a very distinct sonic signature. But what I've found about the API is I think a lot of people use them in such a way, you know, like if you push the hell out of them, then yeah, they get a much more distinct sonic signature. I've found that if you're a little more conservative with the levels, you get a much higher headroom. You get less of like the mid-range focus that I'm used to associating with like an API sound. And you still get this, you know, gigantic low end. You still get a beautiful thing, you know, that is API. But, you know, and obviously your mileage varies, and your style of music, you know, varies too. If you're doing metal or something, that's going to be different. You may really like that pushed sound. But, you know, in both cases with these mixers, I'm going for super high headroom. And so in that context, yeah, that kind of not pushed sound on either one, I find the SSL has a little bit more of a sonic signature. It's not a bad sonic signature. If anything, it, you know, it can be helpful. You know, it can kind of point the way. Now this also might be a little controversial, but like my best analogy for that is Pro Tools versus the DAW that I use the most, which is Nuendo. And you know, and you could substitute Cubase. Nuendo and Cubase are the same DAW basically. And my feeling has always been that that the Steinberg DAW is more neutral. And again, it's not really a good or bad thing. I mean, you'd think, I don't know, I think neutral's better, but like, I don't know, my feeling about Pro Tools, and I have it, I do use it, you know, but is that Pro Tools does have more of a sound, and it kind of, you know, guides you more. Like it's sort of like guardrails on the sound a little bit, you know, and you can do anything you want to do on it, obviously, but it's just not quite as open and neutral as the Steinberg DAW. I find that's very this on the web. Yeah. I find that's the same thing with these two mixers. So that's a long-winded explanation, but that's my feeling so far. We'll see how it goes with time. But you know, the important thing is it's a good sound. I like it, and again, the headroom is there. Like what I needed out of it is totally there, and it's a great solution. I mentioned this in the last video that my original thought was, oh, how can I make this as much one mixer as possible? And I was talking to Ben at Trace Audio about making some kind of a summing solution so that the aux sends would be all on the same buses. And then I realized, why would I want to do that? You know, I have more options keeping them separate, which is, you know, it's just great, because by putting the drum reverb on this mixer and also the drum subgroup on this mixer, I mean, when I was here, I was only using the stereo aux to create the drum subgroup, you know, the drum parallel compression bus. So now that's freed up. You know, that's all being done over there. So and so is the drum reverb I was using over here. So now all of a sudden over here, all I'm using is one mono aux for the vocal reverb at the moment. So now I'm looking to add, you know, more effects, because I've got, you know, I've freed up a stereo send and a mono send over here. So that'll be a lot of fun. And, you know, off the bat, I'm thinking, you know, probably a space echo or something. You know, I'd like to have a real tape echo to go with it. Although I've got some really great emulations, but,
could you try again?
Oh, Siri. So, that's my goal going forward, you know. In terms of, one interesting thing to talk about is just all of the work that I put into reorganizing the bay. That can be difficult. What I did was I began by charting where it was and saving that, and then I made a bunch of just block templates. And you can see this is version D. Like, yeah, I took a lot of liberties in trying things and moving things around and seeing what was going to ultimately work for me. And you know, one of the things that I did was in this temporary smaller studio that I'm in, I can't do drums, I can't do a lot of large scale recording. It's mostly vocals in the booth. So I reorganized a little bit to be more mix centric right now, and you know, when I move we can change that back, but yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have the insert, sends, and returns on either side of most of this gear in this rack, so that it, you know, so that it would be normal. You know, you just in a patch bay, the art of it is all about the efficiencies and what you can, you know, how you can organize it for the least amount of patching and the most normal connections. So, you know, that was really the goal. And you know, this is what I was pointing out before about the X-Desk and the EQs and the insert returns. This is normal tier, and then the insert returns and sends from the API with all of that rack gear in between. And you know, you're going to end up patching depending on what you want to do, but the whole point is you try to figure out the way you like to work the most and try to create a situation where that takes the least amount of patching. Now that's a different story. I mean, this is my, you know, this is my studio. It's very rare that other engineers come in and need to do this kind of patching work, and certainly not without me. Like, usually I'm here to assist if that's happening. If this was a larger commercial studio that had a lot of visiting engineers all the time, we might set that up a little differently. But the downside to that is it's going to be less efficient. You know, I mean, if it's going to be a situation, usually when you see a patch bay, you know, set up in a studio in that kind of situation where there's a lot of visiting engineers, you know, the console has its own, you know, patch system, and then all of the outboard gear will be on its own, you know, on its own bays and racks. And because why would you even bother trying to second guess what somebody's going to want, right? But that ends up in a whole lot more patching, you know, for everybody. So the fact that I'm doing, you know, most of the work, I'm going to organize it around what I need the most. So the only other thing I would talk about, I guess, is there's some back and forth trying to figure out, because now that I've 32 console channels, and I only have a 32 channel converter, the Lynx Aurora N actually gets 32 channels in one rack space, which is amazing. It gets pretty hot, but it's but it's an amazing converter. I love it to death. It sounds amazing. And when you get to that high channel count, like 32, it's actually quite economical. It's cheaper than getting to Apollo 16s, for instance, something like that. And also, I think it's a higher quality as well. So what I wondered about at first was, okay, if I need all 32 channels of D to A converters going to the console, then I don't have the 2 channels for listening, you know, for playback. And at first I was thinking, well, then I need to add a converter and add a Lynx high-low or something along those lines. And then in the end, what I realized was, well, if I dedicate, you know, the last like 31 and 32 to being my playback, which is coming up on the 2-track return of the console, then 31 and 32 on the actual board can be the reverb return, and it works out just fine, and I can get away without getting another converter, which is nice. And the way that that's handled on the patch bay is, well, for one thing I should say is, the way I have this set up, the line inputs on actually on both boards, like, so 1 through 24 are coming directly out of the links. I'm not going to the patch bay on those. That's a direct connection. And I like that. Obviously, when you skip the patch bay, you skip some flexibility, but I like the direct connection. I like the sound quality of that. Everything about that is good for me. But but 25 through 32, everything has to be in banks of 8 because of the DB25 connectors. So 25 through 32, I do bring up on the patch bay. Let me scoot in here. And you can see there, what I've done is 31 and 32, I'm patching to the 2-track inputs on here, which that's its own DB25 connector, wherever the hell it is. There. Sorry about the focus, but yeah, so I've got 2-track A, B, C, and D. So I'm patching that, and then what I'm doing is, so 25 through 29, I'm having, they just normal to the API line inputs, right? So I don't have to do any patching. It automatically goes to these channels. And then this patch underneath is, sorry, right here, is the reverb return. Okay, going right to here. And it's great. And that's, you know, it's a neat and tidy solution. That's what patch bays are for, focus. And it's working out really well. So yeah, I think that's about it. This is kind of cute that I have the SSL UC1. It turns this into kind of a SSL world, which is fun. So we've got like SSL API Fern, and it's just a great system. You know, this is the first mix I've just sort of thrown up on the new system, and it happens very quickly, very easily. Really felt good. And again, the gear all sounds great. And you know, now my challenge is just need more processing, really. Every one of these summing inputs has inserts on them. Right now, you know, these all have their dedicated channel EQs. All I have for the 16 through 32 are these bad boys, which is like, poor me. These fantastic passive tube equalizers. These are Hazelrig VLC ones. These have just recently gotten distribution with the big boys, with Sweetwater and Vintage King, and they're selling like hotcakes. The guys who make them are George and Jeff Hazelrig, and they're actually in my town, and I know them, and they're great guys. And they also build all the Fern gear as well, so that's convenient. And as a matter of fact, the VLC one is it's the same preamp circuit as the VT2, but they've added passive equalizers, and it's just this Swiss Army knife of a device. It's great. So there's both instrument input, direct input on the front. It can also be a mic input on the front or the back, and the back also has mic and line inputs on separate jacks. So right now I'm just dedicating these to the line inputs on the back, and if I need the mic inputs, I just do them on the front. But you know, it's nice to have. Yeah, I mean, they're EQs that are available now, and then these are the Audioscape versions of the EQP 1A Pultec tube EQs. So both passive tube. They're actually very different in sound, which is nice. I appreciate that. But for the moment, you know, if I need just EQ on acoustic guitar and keys, yeah, you know, I'll use those. And as time goes on, you know, we'll build up stuff, I'm sure. So that's where I'm at right now. But thanks everybody. Happy New Year. This is January 1st that I'm doing this video, and I hope everybody's having has a great year this year. And I'm sure looking forward to working on this setup. And you know, I've got a full slate of mixing to do with artist Matt Friedman and Matt Dorsey doing this, and a bunch of other stuff too. So it's going to be busy, it's going to be fun, and you know, I'm looking forward to your questions. If you're liking this video and the videos that I'm making, do please you know, like and subscribe, and feel free to drop anything, any questions or comments in the comment section. And it's great talking to you guys, and that's it. All right, take care. Bye bye.